Give me a big pig welcome, okay, for Carrie Ann Schultz.
Hello, everybody.
You're awesome.
Matt Robinson, one of the best guys I know. Can y'all hear me? Yeah. Okay, yes, and Matt is right. Gosh, we've had our journey for so long. I've been practicing law for 17 years. Matt and I have been friends since he moved here, when we were together in 2002 through another investment club and everything. How are y'all doing tonight? It's like nice to be out of a classroom, out of the courtroom and all that. All right, you ready? I'm going to test you a little bit. I want you to turn around to the person next to you. Okay, so you're going to turn around to the person behind you, say your name and where you were born, and then look back at me. How do y'all feel? Did everybody follow instructions? Ooh, that's what contract law is all about. Are we still talking? Are we still talking about where you were born? Did you talk about what you had for breakfast today? Talk about how many kids you have? Hello. Okay. Well, good. That exercise is kind of fun. I do it with students all day long. As Matt said, I do come to you with a background in an area of real estate that I love. I eat and breathe this. I'm an investor like y'all, and I don't take risk. I do everything ethically. And Matt knows that, and those of you, so many of my clients and so many of my friends are in this room, many familiar faces that I've seen have closed your transaction, and I think there's one thing that we can say about all of us in this room is that we strive for ethics, because a lot of people in jail, the people that I've closed transactions for, lawyers that have been disbarred for just not doing the right thing. And so if you do the right thing, you make money, right? And so I'm just part of the toolkit that y'all have in this wonderful box of what we call our investment toolbox. Everybody has a toolbox, and we all need each other. We need lenders, we need appraisers, we need our insurance people, we need Eddie. Everybody needs Eddie in their life, and love Eddie. And so we'll go from there. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a different approach to this, because as an instructor and as a lawyer, it can get boring, right? I mean, contract law was actually my favorite class in law school, which surprises me, and real property too. But those were the two areas. So I'm going to take you through some things that I need to, and not so much an instruction, but also give you some good examples of things that sometimes we as attorneys, as people who buy property, as homeowners, really don't think about and need to take the step back. Well, I did that whole exercise with you of turning around, because first of all, I was testing you a little bit. Right, get excited. You haven't had a break. Many of you maybe haven't had dinner. I haven't had lunch yet either, but it's one of those things when you're going all day long. And I had you look at the person behind you, because many of you probably haven't either met that person or knew that person. But I asked you the question of, did you name and where you were born, right? Do you remember? Where was he born? Right, you know? Okay, Ron, where? Yeah, but then when they turned around, did you ask?
She was so tied up.
Okay, I love you, Ron. Okay, so what we're talking about is a contract, okay? Our human reaction, okay, with each other every day is important. We learn so much from just talking on the elevator, talking to the mailman, talking to the nanny, the dog, whoever we talk to during the day, we are interacting with that person. Okay, when you guys go to Sally, who has her for sale by home, for sale by owner, you're knocking on the door, you're having a conversation with this person, right? That's fine. We can talk all day long. But in real estate, it doesn't matter what you say, it's what's on paper. Right? Because Florida has what we call the Florida Statutes of Fraud. And William's my buddy, and here on board with me, an excellent real property attorney and closer. He's fantastic. So at the end of the day, he can tell me, and we all can as lawyers. Are there any other lawyers in the group? Okay. Lawyers will tell you that anything in real estate is not enforceable unless it's in writing. Okay? No matter the beautiful relationship you have with each other, if you know the person, if it's your aunt, it's your uncle, it has to be in writing to be enforceable. Okay? So that's called the Florida Statute of Frauds. So Richard, let's say, Richard, I'm buying your house, and you're like, oh, Carrie Ann, don't worry about it. We'll just take $2,000 off. Hey, Richard, that's right. Well, I'll fix that bathroom. Well, if it's not in writing, it's not enforceable. So you go before the judge in Santa Rosa County, and Richard and I, we would never be in litigation, but if we were, and the judge says, well, Ms. Schultz, show me where Richard said he would fix the bathroom and give you a credit at closing for $2,000. Show me on a piece of paper. Not enforceable. Okay, so all of this has some relevance. Let's talk about basic contract law, and then we'll get to some good stuff, and I'll tell you some stories that'll make you cringe in your seat, okay? Because I've been a claims attorney for a long time. I have, sadly, I've dealt with the FBI on transactions that have gone really, really bad as an expert. And I'll tell you some of those stories, of course, redacting the guilty and some of the innocent on that to protect identity. But anyway, so contract requires 4 elements. And this is important because when you are in the trenches, I want to make sure your toolbox, I want to make sure you're using the right contract. Okay, and we're going to talk about the contract. Okay, so you have to have offer, acceptance, consideration, and mutual assent. Okay, an offer. If I put a for sale sign in my yard, technically I'm offering my house for sale, right? Okay, and I'm not going to get into all the elements of offer and revocation of an offer and rejection for all the legal scholars out there, because that, you can come to one of my classes for that for 3 hours and get credit for that. But for an offer, then you have acceptance and consideration and mutual assent. It takes 2 to tango. So Ron and I are good friends, and if I'm going to go buy Ron's house, we have to have a meeting of the minds, right? Okay, so your toolbox. The contract that I prefer is the one that the Florida Bar and the Florida Realtors approve. Some of you are clients of mine and you use the contract that I draft for you because I'm always involved in your transactions, and those of you know who you are. Okay, I was one of the 12 attorneys. I represented your area from here to Tallahassee, so I was representative, and I just got off that board in February because it's just flying around Miami and all of that trying to do that. We just finished that and it got approved in April. So the new Florida Bar Realtor approved contract was one that we drafted, and I love that contract. I love that contract because it includes everything, okay? And we'll go through that here in a second about what you need in there. So let's talk about your toolbox. Whatever contract you use, make sure it has all the material terms, that all terms are definite and certain. Don't just get so excited to hurry up and seal the deal. It's like following in love. You got to meet those terms. You got to understand that person. You got to know that property. Don't just get excited and go, oh my gosh, this house is only worth $25,000. Well, there's a reason it's worth $25,000, right? Woo! Maybe we have a big termite infestation. Maybe we have a mold problem. There's some reason why there's a price point on this. Okay, now Matt's got some good information on his website too. So the contract that you use is the most important. Just like the doctor has the stethoscope, right? Just like the construction guy has the hammer and the ruler. There are certain tools that you need. So starting off with the right contract is what's important. Okay, now I want to go into the contract and some of the things that I see in the trenches that are always inherently wrong. And some of you I'm going to use as examples, and you've given me permission to do that. Who is your seller? Very, very important. What do you use to determine who owns that piece of real estate? What do you use? Somebody brave enough. Come on, Tom. There you go. Okay. Property appraiser information in Santa Rosa and Santa Rosa County is not updated every day. In fact, it's updated maybe 3 to every 4 months. Okay? So Ron, if you just did a deal and you sold a property to Matt Robinson's LLC, we may not see it until December. Okay? So you need to understand who your seller is, and you need to make sure it's right. Let me give you some tricks here. Don't just put Joe A. Smith and Deb Smith, because if it says it's Joseph A. Smith and Deborah A. Smith, that's what you need to put. And oh, by the way, if Mr. Smith is the third needs to go after that. Okay, so what I tell clients is this: go to the property appraiser website, go to the left-hand side, and click the last deed, and look at who it was prepared by. In the state of Florida, the clerk accepts anything if it's on a napkin with coffee stains, okay? Which is really sad. I don't mean to say you should just be a lawyer or title company to be able to record an official document, but I do think that should be the case, because I probably wouldn't have a job on certain title issues if that was the case, because I spend most of my day correcting mistakes, okay? So that other people did, which is fine. I don't mind doing that. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is you have to be very careful, because I have gotten, and I'm sure William has too, in my career, many people out of a contract, a seller who didn't want to sell or a buyer who didn't want to buy because of certain specific terms in a contract that were not identified properly. Okay? So who is my seller? Husband and wife. What if it says the estate of, bless you, the estate of John A. Smith? How many of you think that just anybody in the family can sign that contract on behalf of the estate? I got my buddy here, Ron. Ron knows. Ron, who can sign that contract? He's got it. Ron's a very good investor. I love working with Ron. Ron knows. Ron will call me and be like, hey, this person died, and I've had several probate cases with him. Oh my gosh, Carrie Ann, but a probate hasn't been opened. So then a probate needs to be opened. You don't want to spend all your time inspecting this property, putting earnest money down. Time is money, right? And doing this just to find out that the wrong person who didn't have legal authority signed a contract, and now we've got Richard who's offering more money, and now they're like, bye, Ron, I'm going to go with Richard. Okay, it happens every day. Okay, so if a property, sadly, is owned by someone who died, you need legal counsel on that. Because if a probate hasn't been opened, and if it's non-homestead, the court will have to authorize that sale. So now you got to have some lawyer who knows what they're doing to file what's called a petition to authorize the sale. And if time is the money, you got to have someone that can get in there and do it quickly and not wait 2 years. Because you want to make your money, not sit in the bucket, right? Okay, I understand. Toolbox. Okay. Another thing you catch on who is your seller, and this is all very relevant, is let's say that John and Sarah are married. Okay? But John just passed away, and they owned it as tenancy by the entirety. Married couples own it tenancy by the entirety. Do we have to have a probate? No. Because in the state of Florida, when you are married and sadly one spouse dies, we just have to record the death certificate without the cause of death. So we would only need the wife on that scenario. Okay? Let's use all you fantastic people here. Johnny, Richard, Mark, and Todd. 4 brothers, pretend. Okay? And their dad just died. Sadly. I don't even want to think about that. And you all have a 1/4 interest in the property. Okay? Ron, you go meet with this family. Okay? And do you have to get all their signatures? If it was a life estate interest and now all sons have a 1/4 interest, would you need every one of their signatures? Absolutely. And what if Mark says, I don't want to sell? Do you have a deal? No. Okay? Anyone under the age of 18 cannot sign a contract. So don't even try it because it's unenforceable. And children do inherit property, like if one spouse dies and there's a life estate interest to the surviving spouse, only on homestead property, then you want to make sure that that child cannot sell that property. There are certain exceptions with guardianship. I won't even go into any of that. Okay, what if it is a company? What if it just says ABC Investments? In Florida, you have to have the right legal name. Okay, so if it's ABC Investments, LLC, you have to put comma, an Alabama limited liability company or a Florida limited liability company. The failure to identify the state of formation can make that unenforceable. Toolbox. Got it in your toolbox? So who is my seller? Okay, I could go on and on for 3 hours just on who my seller is. I won't do that to you all. Okay, now who's my buyer? You need to know how title is going to vest. You would think that most people could care less about whether or not you're going to form some LLC or you do and/or signs. How many of you do, like Thomas Armstrong and/or signs? How many of you put and/or signs? Okay, some of you do. Okay, be careful with that a little bit because then you need to make sure in the real estate contract under Section 18 or 19 that you put assignability in there. Okay, so you need to make sure that who your buyer is, you have that correctly. Because if you don't, the seller could say, sorry, they don't have to sell to you. Okay, so who is my buyer is equally as important as who is my seller. All right, and I could talk about all that all day too, but I'm going to jump down to legal descriptions. Okay, we're kind of following the flow of a contract. And sorry, you guys, I don't have a PowerPoint. I have several, but they're all a bunch of legal stuff, and you'd all be sleeping, and I'll be bringing you pillows here in a minute. But anyway, so on your legal descriptions, I'm going to talk about a couple of claims that I have handled where they were title companies, and then I got hired by the underwriter to get them out of this mess. Okay, I had a matter that happened. It was horrible in 2004. It was probably the worst ones I've seen because it's a really good real estate agent who I love and who is very well respected in the Destin area. And this property, this sweet man was selling this property for $650,000. It was a waterfront property, okay? But it was a big piece of property. And so the way they had it listed, there was no connection. The seller lived in California, so he wasn't local. So this is why, what are you going to put in the legal description? What am I buying? Am I buying a Cadillac today? Am I buying a Porsche? Am I buying a Ford? What am I buying? When you go to sell a vehicle, you put the VIN number, right? You need to put the parcel ID number. Don't use abbreviated legal descriptions, okay? Get the deed from the prior title, but make sure at the top on the left-hand corner that a reputable title company or law firm prepared that deed. If it is a quick claim deed, do not trust it. If it's handwritten, do not trust it, okay? I'm just here to tell you, when I see that, I'm automatically, my little toolbox is going like, okay? So the legal description is very important. Many of these cases result in bad legal descriptions. So what was the bad case that I defended? We ultimately settled, and it was horrible. This poor guy in California had come down here and met with this great real estate agent. Real estate agent listed the property for sale, waterfront, for $650,000. Went to closing. The buyer paid cash. He was from New Jersey, and he was not a nice person, okay? But what was marketed to him is what he thought he was going to get. Unbeknownst to the real estate broker and the buyer, the seller from California had a survey done that divided this parcel. Well, when you divide a parcel, you can't divide it between yourself. Ron can't take his property unless it's what we call a small-scale subdivision, not a subdivision, but a subdivide of a property, and that's a whole nother area of law. But you can't just go and go, okay, well, Carrie Ann's going to have this property and she's going to have this. Even if you want to divide your parcel, you'll still have the same parcel ID until you sell it out. Well, our seller wanted to take parcel A and sell it, but retain parcel B, because he was getting married and he was going to build his family a new house. Okay, now you ready? Get your Kleenex box out. Went to closing. It was a mail away. On the deed, it included the mommy meets and bounds legal. Well, thinking he was represented not by an attorney, but going to a title company and doing the closing, he sold that. 3 weeks later, he came back down and met with the real estate agent saying, hey, do you know a good builder for my other lot? Guy's like, what other lot? You sold that property. He's like, no, my other lot right here. Whoa, can you imagine? Okay. What happened was there was a failure to communicate. That real estate agent got suspended, actually was put on probation for 3 years. It was horrible. And the claims, the title company got in big trouble. And I was the attorney that got them out of the mess because I represented the insurance carrier, and they wrote a big fat check. And the guy ended up conveying that parcel back, but then the other person the buyer got $300,000. What a bad day. All because a survey was not presented. Okay, so what do I mean? What are you actually buying? Okay, I did a closing today on a unit at Bahia in Sandestin, and the guy was like, I'm like, oh no, this is a lock-off. You're getting 4006 and 408. He's like, oh yeah, okay. And I said, no, you understand this is one unit, but it has two different numbers because you can lock off, so you can rent it as a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, but it's one. And just kind of going through that, well, I had the real estate agent change it because she forgot the other number, part of the legal, so I made them do an addendum to contract. It's just one silly example of we caught that, But the guy didn't understand. We get to closing. He's like, why is my address unit 406 and 408? Because there were 2 doors and it's like that. But what I'm trying to tell you is he's very sophisticated. And he was buying this unit as investment. He lives in Alabama. But what I'm telling you is your legal description is very, very important. So make sure you have that properly included in there. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about personal property. How many of you have ever bought a property and it's really important that the seller keeps certain personal items there, whether it be window treatments, whether it be other things? How many of you thought that was really important? Yes, very good. Okay, that's important. So personal property, on the contract, you want to identify that because it's not assumed. Okay, those of you that are licensees, I know that you will basically make an itemization of what personal property needs to be included on that, or what will stay in the contract. So just make sure that you absolutely include, that swing set or those 2 urns outside, because many of you, raise your hand if you were there to buy and hold as a landlord. Okay, long-term hold. How many of you want to buy a property, fix it up, and sell it? Okay, so that's majority of you. Okay, so really the personal property component is irrelevant. But you can still take those other items. I know Matt has done this many a times. You could take items from one house and put them in another house, right? Recycle that, because why throw a good stove away if it's not compatible with this property when you can use it for another property? Toolbox, it's money, right? So personal property and how personal property, the itemization of personal property is so incredibly important. All of you are cash buyers, right? Or do you get financing? Okay, Robert just bought another property from someone in this room who used an IRA. How many of you have ever used an IRA in a transaction? Very good. Very smart. Good job. Okay, and I know you. Okay, so Robert and I had closed this transaction, and how incredible is it? Because once this property is sold, that money goes back to fund that IRA. Not a bad day, right? So there's some creative ways to do that. But what was important about Robert's contract is he needed to include those specific terms in that contract that allowed for that type of financing. You can't just check the box and put, oh, I'm going to get a loan. Nowadays, in the contract, you guys will see, and I know you all use different contracts, so if I was teaching this to brokers or agents and you were getting, educational credits for it, I would go through that very specifically. But you've got to talk about, is it VA? Is it conventional financing? What is the interest rate? If you're using an IRA, what I would do as a contingency is contingent upon terms and conditions acceptable to the custodian, okay, as well as for the benefit of the IRA, okay, who has that. Because what if I don't like those terms and conditions? What if Midland IRA or whoever, I'm just thinking out loud, I just did one with Midland actually today, and my guy was like, hey, wait a second, Carrie Ann, they're charging me this thing or whatever, and we worked it out. But what if you didn't like those terms? That all goes to the financing. Just like if you go and Derek goes and gets a loan with Bank of America and conventional financing, and all of a sudden he thought he was going to get 3.2, and they're like, sorry, buddy, love you, got great income and great credit, but it's 3.7 today. You never locked yourself in, and you're like, I want to get out of this contract, and he's got a deal with Mark. He can pull the plug, right? All goes down to don't just skip over that. Even if you are a cash buyer, you always need an exit door. How many of you, I had you turn around earlier, how many of you, when you go into a building or you go in the movie theater, you find the exit door, right? You do, right? Because if there was a fire, would we all know where we'd be traveling out this way, right? So you do that. You always toolbox. In your contract toolbox, you need an exit strategy. Because you may get into a deal and go, holy smokes, I got another deal over here that may be a lot better, right? How many of you have done that before? You buy something, you're like, man, why did I buy that? It may be something silly when you knew you should have put your money someplace else. I have. the next day going, why in the world did I do that when I could have done this deal with someone else, right? We all have done it, and yours truly up here has done it. But you learn from those mistakes. You learn from those mistakes. Okay, in talking about financing, be very, very careful. Some of you in this room I work with routinely, and you work with each other and you have that interplay. How many of you have a partnership with your teammates in here? Okay, and I know who you are. Okay, if you don't have that relationship with each other, you need to get that relationship with each other, because everyone in this room either has the money to buy or will give you the money to buy or knows the people who will, right? You all are shaking your heads because you know that. Every single one of us in this room have that team. Toolbox is the team. Having a toolbox equals money at the finish line. Exactly. That's the only way you can do it. And you don't cut the professionals out, because the second you do that, you're in litigation. And I'm not tooting my own horn. William's here. I'm telling you, a lot of people forget this, and I'm not saying this. Trust me, I have enough files on my desk 7 days a week. But what I'm trying to tell you is getting those professionals, whether it be that financial advisor, that same insurance person, that same home inspector, that same lender, that same lawyer or couple of lawyers, or that same closing agent. Okay? Many of you don't realize this, but in the state of Florida, thank gosh, I was one of those attorneys that fought hard on promulgated rates. Protect the public with title insurance. Don't be letting some mom and pop law firm or some mom and pop title company go under or over promulgated rate to lure business. No way. Everybody charges the same rate. Doesn't matter if you close here in Miami, Fort Lauderdale. It's based on purchase price and loan amount. And if you close with an attorney, to the extent it's not a commercial transaction, it doesn't cost you a penny more. Okay? And usually you have better coverage because of our policies and different things like that. And we can fix the title issues so that your time is money. Once again, one more hand in the toolbox. I'm not just saying that about my profession. I'm just being honest. I'm just being absolutely honest. Okay, so now you go into, you've got this contract. You've got offer and acceptance, consideration, and mutual assent. You have formed this contract, and I'm speaking real fast, you guys, over lots of academic area of law. Now you're thinking to yourself, hey, I've got this deal. Well, do you really have a deal? Have you really thought about what you're buying? No, you've protected yourself. Now I got to go from contract to closing. I've got some contingencies, and in the legal world, we call these excuses of performance. So as an instructor or professor, I would call those, Judge, I'm excused from performance. Todd, you're the judge. Why, Ms. Schultz? Because this, that, and other. Okay, so let's talk about, you ready for some more toolbox stuff? Here is, what are your contingencies? All your due diligence, everything, okay? A home inspection, satisfactory to buyer. An appraisal at or above the purchase price, right? Financing contingency. And it's not just financing that anyone will give you. It's financing under terms and conditions that are acceptable to me. All of you have great credit and great income. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. But the problem is that you've got to protect yourself, because any bank will give you 8%. Sure, I'll give you 8% today. Come see me. I'll loan you the money in my back seat of my car. But the point is that's not right for you. Who the hell wants to spend 8%? None of us do, right? I mean, hard money lending, well, that's a whole different area, and that's fast, okay? But at the end of the day, you want terms and conditions satisfactory to you. Richard may be able to go to Gulf Coast Community Bank, or now First Bank, or whatever it's called now, and say, hey, I get my loan. But if they say, Richard, we're only doing 10 years, buddy. And you're like, no, I need a 15-year at a minimum. I want a 20-year. Well, he wants to be able to then go over to Derek and say, hey, here's a release and cancellation of contract because the financing terms are not acceptable to me. Okay? You always need to be in control. Just like when you did the exercise turning around, you were in control. The person was turned around. You're in control. What'd you do? You turned around, or you waited for the person to turn around and tell you the information, right? You always need to be in control in real estate. If you're not, you lose money and you put your other assets at risk. Real estate, remember, the biggest asset we buy is a house, right? If you think about your whole budget, okay, you think about having a baby's expensive, having a dog, putting a kid through school. Hey, I know, I'm a parent, I get it, okay? But at the end of the day, the largest asset that most Americans buy is their primary residence, right? So if you think about it, we've got to protect that. And then for you to take this big residence that you have and start buying all these baby residences and accumulate wealth, you got to be smart about it, right? So you need to be able to say, like, let's say Johnny and I, you and I are doing a deal, okay? And Johnny's like, hey, Carrie Ann, I had Mark come over. It's going to cost too much. And I'm like, well, Mark, man, you agreed to pay me $35,000 for this house in East Hill, right? Which wouldn't happen in East Hill, right? Funny, Schultz, funny. And so Johnny says, no, Carrie Ann, paragraph 9 says, and I'm like, oh, you're right. So he sends it to the law firm or title company, and then the EMDs return to him. You always need to stay in control, just in case you change your mind. It may not be anything else than, hey, I got a better deal with Richard the next day. Sorry, Schultz, see you later. I'm going with Richard. Okay? You need to be holding the toolbox, not the other person, in an ethical way. Ethical way. Okay, so what are some of what we call the excuses of performance? Are you ready for this? So the excuse of performance would be any contingency that discharges your performance under a contract. Okay? Financing. Talked about that. Inspection. Wetlands on the property. The intended use of the property. Right? Okay. Repairs not to exceed a certain amount. I mean, I've had that in a contract. I'm like, that's kind of cool. You know, this contract is contingent upon, this contract is contingent upon the repair, the cost to complete or the repairs not to exceed $12,000. Now remember, there's an end date. The clock ticks. The contract signed, the finish line is close date. Contract to close. Everything you do has a start and a finish, right? All these contingencies have to stop at some point, right? Appraisal. That the property will appraise at or above purchase price, and that appraisal contingency needs to have an end date. Usually it's 10 days before closing. Okay? How many of you have done short sales? Because I think I'm the last one on the planet. I just closed two Friday. Short sales are still alive and well. They're still out there. So if you're doing a short sale, there is a special writer for a short sale. Please get with me or William or Matt or someone about a short sale contingency. Short sales are great, but short sales they're not really investor properties. Okay, short sales are awesome in that it allows the seller to sell a property for fair market value, but really under new guidelines, the short sale lender is going to expect a purchase price basically at fair market value. Gone are the days, everyone had a misconception about short sales. The day I was doing short sales way back in the day, really in 2005, when lenders weren't even prepared for the short sale process. We were all kind of making it up as we go. So if you do a short sale, you really almost need to work with there's several of us, but you need to work with an attorney on a short sale because you can get burned if you don't do it right. Okay, so just be careful. I'm all about your success and your toolbox continuing down the road to close. Okay. What other contingencies can you all think about? That would be, in our hypothetical, we've got Todd over here who is our judge. And where Todd would say, yep, investor, you're excused from buying this property. You get your earnest money back. Nobody can sue you for specific performance or damages because you did what you were supposed to do. You gave yourself an excuse of performance. Can any of you think of any other contingencies? Hey, Bob, how are you? Good. Okay. Very good. Okay, so let's talk about when hurricane. Who was here for 2004? Okay, we all, yes, I understand. 7 feet of water there later. Okay, I understand that. Okay, so any type of inclement weather. Now let's talk about this. In the Florida Bar and Realtor approved contract is what we call the risk of loss paragraph. Can you tell I love this contract? And the reason is it puts the risk on the seller until the property is sold. Okay, good job. Now what that is let's say Eddie and I have a deal and Eddie's selling me his house. And sadly, there is a fire. I don't know, think about it, Eddie. But let's say Eddie's house, his investment property, burns to the ground. And I'm supposed to close next week. Well, what do you guys think? The risk of loss paragraph, now I don't know what box we would check, but under Florida law and in the contract, the risk of loss and the duty to maintain the property until closing is on Eddie, the seller. Okay? That house burns down. What happens? Well, the contract, the Florida Bar approved and Florida Realtor approved contract provides you a roadmap of what we are going to do. So if Eddie gets insurance funds for that, it's a total loss, let's say, which is not going to happen overnight. We would all get together and technically if he has a mortgage on the property, obviously I want the house back. It's gone. It's burnt to the ground. We would have to work out what the contract says. I have had those cases following Hurricane Ivan, Hurricane Dennis, and fire cases where we deal with assigning insurance proceeds to put Humpty Dumpty back together, the house, or we just cancel the contract, the loan gets paid off, and now you have a piece of vacant dirt. But the duty is on you as the seller to maintain that property in the condition the property was at the time the contract was signed. And that is in the statute and in your contract, if you're using the contract that I think you're using, okay? So that's very important, very, very important. Side note, I do want you guys to think about this. If you are a buyer, I want you to take pictures of the property you are intending to buy. Very important. Because let's say that I go and buy one of Robert's properties and I go in there the next day and I'm like, for goodness sakes, Robert, you took out the ceiling fan. What'd you do with this built-in shelf? I mean, he would never do this because he's a great investor and he's honest and ethical. But holy smokes, can you imagine? Well, as an attorney, I don't know what that property looked like beforehand. In your toolbox, you need your iPhone or your camera. And that you need to take photographs. And those of you guys that do rehabs, showcase that. You know, that big old black line from your child in that back room was not there before you walked in there and did a review of the home. Okay? These are things that as an attorney we can help you if we have the evidence to show. Always take photographs. Always. Okay? And as I mentioned, the personal property thing, when in doubt, it may not be a fixture. Refrigerators are not fixtures. Microwaves not built in are not fixtures. Certain lights are not fixtures. Okay? So there may be something, big old urn on the porch that makes it have that beautiful curb appeal that you think you're going to get another $10,000 for. May not be a fixture. That may go in the moving van when the buyer says, bye, have a nice day, or the seller says, bye, have a nice day. Okay, so you need to make sure that you protect yourself on that. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about, and I'm going to bring up another client here in a second. I do want to talk about tenant occupancy real quickly. How many of you would rather buy a property with a tenant in the property? Yep, I agree with you, okay? Any day of the week, I would, okay? But a good tenant. Not a tenant that just gives me $1 here and there and tries to pay me with going down to the blood donation and say, oh, when I get my blood check back, Carrie Ann, I'll pay you. Nope, that's not how we're going to play the game. We're not going to play the game like that. Okay, so here's what you need to do. And my buddy Tim, say hi. Okay, so Tim he was introduced a little bit ago. Tim and I handled a really cool transaction. And Tim, I can't say enough nice things about you. And Tim had called me. He didn't know me. and said, hey, I had a friend, I really need to talk to you about a transaction because I've got a couple people in there, and what do I need to do? Tim's first thing was, I want to protect the tenants. And I was writing notes, and I was like, put a little smiley face, because I thought, what a nice guy. Here's an investor where the rent, he wasn't getting that much rent in this property, okay? And the person who had it before him really didn't have good paperwork. I mean, he kind of bought a mess. And he said, well, what do I need to do? And of course, I held his hand the whole way through legally, and it worked out really nicely. And we were able to, when you buy a property where it's tenant occupied, Florida statute chapter 83 protects the tenant. You can't just have the tenant go out, okay? The tenant just doesn't disappear, okay? So what you need to think about is, you can't change that lease by law. You get the property with the tenant, how the tenant exists and their whole history, and the lease that you entered into, because the lease is assigned to you. You can't change the lease until the lease expires. So Tim kind of had a difficult seller. Smile. I agree. Nice guy, but difficult. And really was an absentee landlord. And so I did all the estoppels for Tim. We got all the estoppels signed because I needed to make sure none of these units were in litigation, that all the security deposits were transferred over, rent was prorated and all of that, because he didn't want to buy a lawsuit. Who wants to do that? It ended up being a happy ending. It ended up being a really happy ending, but it took a team. He had his toolbox. He knew, and not saying you have to have a lawyer, but he knew when he needed to call help, right, Tim? And now he made a heck of a lot of money on that transaction, and he'll continue to do that. So that's another really good example of putting your teammates together, because a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and just get rid of the tenant. You cannot do that. Okay, now let's fast forward. You have a contract. You're going to closing, right? Just real quickly, besides the excuses of performance, there are some defenses to formation. I'm going to quickly talk about that. Defenses to formation, which is, Todd, you're the judge. Judge, we don't even have a contract. Well, why, Ms. Schultz? Because the person who signed the contract had incapacity. Well, what do you mean? Judge, Ms. Schultz went to that nursing home and had that 94-year-old lady sign that contract, blah, 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 blah. The incapacity or incompetency is a defense to formation. Never, ever, ever sign a contract with someone in a bar, in a nursing home, in a hospital, okay? I actually did a closing at the Fish House the other day, and Collier Romero is a good friend of mine. He's like, Schultz, do you want a glass of wine? I was like, oh, no. He's like, oh, she must be in work mode. Because you never ever want to say, well, we signed and so had a glass of wine, and then they go to the judge, and the judge says, no, I have an excuse for formation. Intoxication is an excuse. Okay, never, ever sign at a nursing home. Okay, so because those are things, and if you feel like someone is elderly, you probably need to get someone to help you or witness those signatures, and never have your spouse or family members notarize or witness anything, because it's unenforceable. Got it? Okay, so intoxication, incapacity, infancy, anyone under the age of 18 cannot sign a contract in the state of Florida. Doesn't matter how smart and how tall they are, they can't. Okay, undue influence and duress. I actually had a horrible closing. I was a newer lawyer back in 2003, and my boss downtown came up to me and he's like, hey, I want you to handle this. You guys, I'm going to tell you 2 bad cases real fast, and you're going to be like, this is not good, Carrie Ann. Okay, so he called me in, and I went up to Dan Lozier, great lawyer, and I was talking to Bill Bond at Clark Partington, and I said to him, hey, because Bill was representing the bank, and he says, what's the matter, Carrie Ann? And Bill and I are like this. He's kicked my butt a couple times in the courtroom, but we're great friends, and he's been practicing law for a long time. He said, something's not right. I said, Bill, I have a really bad feeling about this. This lady is just having a meltdown. And he was Coastal Bank and Trust attorney. And this couple, unbeknownst to the rest of us, was going through, this is sad, they were going through a divorce, okay? And they came in at different times, and I thought that was a little weird. You pick up on things as an attorney, and you're trained to understand nonverbal and verbal communication, eye contact, how you sit, different things, because we pick jurors and all that stuff, so you're psychologically, you kind of pick it up. So he was coming in after the fact. So I had him coming in at 10, and she came in at 8:45. I mean, she kept crying, and I'm like, ma'am, come here. Like, you need a hug. You need some love. Can I get you a donut? Like, what do you need? Like, no, I mean, it was bad. I mean, it was really bad. And I said, what's bothering you? She's like, I just don't want to do this. Well, I'm like, well, don't. Okay, well, fast forward, she went ahead and signed, shaking, and I'm like, this is weird. This is like a cash out refinance, or getting like $300,000, nice house over in North Hill. I'm like, I don't get it. Okay, and then why are they coming differently? They were both working out of town. Okay, you ready for this? They were going through divorce. He came in, he had threatened to kill her. Okay, so I had her go into another office. She finally said, he is going to hurt me. So as an attorney, immediately. So here's what I did. So we called law enforcement. He came in at his time, right, which is like 45 minutes later, and he sat in the room, and I had him sign everything, okay? And then he said, well, when am I going to get my money? And I said, well, you have a right of rescission. You have a 3-day right of rescission on a cash out refinance, okay? And he said, well, where is my wife's stuff? And I said, well, she's already signed that. And he said, well, did she sign this document? I said, no, she didn't. It was right to cancel, okay, because you have 3 days to cancel. And she said she wanted to think about it. So he went out to his car, okay, and he sat there. He knew she was coming back. So the deputy sat out there, and he had a gun. Well, he was arrested, okay? So that, obviously, that refinance didn't go forward, okay? Okay, but what I'm trying to tell you is certain things, that was duress, where her life was threatened if she did not sign that documentation. That is called duress. Judge, we don't have documents. We don't have a contract. You can't threaten someone's life and force them to sign something. Okay, one other thing, power of attorneys. How many of you use power of attorneys in a transaction? Oh, good. Don't. Okay, let me tell you a big, fast example of why I discourage power of attorneys and why power of attorneys have to be approved by the title underwriter, the lawyer handling the transaction, and the lender. Okay? Fast forward, I was handling a closing in 2006. Oh, another sad story. Husband and wife. Husband was defending our country in Afghanistan. At the time, John Bordelon and Matt and I were law partners at the time. And our driveway to our office in Gulf Breeze had this big tree. Well, they had a moving truck. Well, the wife had me go grab something or whatever, and I forgot to get something. Thank goodness I did. I walked out of one of the conference rooms into our waiting room, and being a mom, and not at the time, loving kids, I was like, oh my gosh, these kids are so cute in the waiting room, and they were kind of being loud, and I had 3 closings at the same time. It was pretty bad. And this guy's like, oh, I'm like, oh, these are so cute. These kids are so cute. And he's like, oh, those are my girlfriends. Ready where this is going? I was like, oh, Sarah? Oh, they're so cute. I was like, oh my gosh. Her husband is in Afghanistan. She's got a boyfriend with the kids and a moving truck, and she's moving to Texas. Okay, you ready? He has no idea. Okay, so at the time, what time was that? It was 9:30 in the morning. I sent an urgent email to the airmen defending our country in Afghanistan. Urgent, if you get this, please call me. Urgent, if you get this, please call me, and called a number. Okay? Didn't answer, no response email. Okay? So we went ahead and let her go forward signing everything. And she says, well, will you please wire the money to this account? And it was a USAA account. Okay? Well, I'm not stupid. I just witnessed, I didn't bring anything up about, I said, oh, your kids are so cute, but never brought anything up about the boyfriend, because she was using her husband's power of attorney to sell the house, right? He had no idea that she was leaving him, taking about $215,000. Remember, this was 2005. Things were happening back then, remember? And going to Texas. So he would have come home from defending our country, if he even survived that, God bless him, with a wife, with kids, and a boyfriend, and all of his money gone. because she was probably going to take it out of that account and go to spend it. What I'm telling you is we stopped that. So what happened was I ended up holding that money in escrow so she couldn't take it until their divorce attorneys could work it out. But if I wasn't on my toes that day, that would have been a really sad day for that sweet man defending our country. Okay. All right. So I know these are horror stories. Trust me, I've got a lot of them. But what I hope you guys learned today was offer, acceptance, consideration, mutual assent. You've got to use the right contract. How there are defenses to formation. We talked about that: incapacity, undue influence, duress, meaning, hey, I've got a contract, but I have an ability. The contract doesn't exist because of that duress situation. Yeah, we signed a contract, Judge, or I signed a note, I signed a mortgage, but the guy had a gun to my head, or whatever the scenario is, the sad scenario. Then we have what we call excuses to performance. Get your toolbox out of all the contingencies you have in your contract. Okay? All right, and then everything from inspection and all of that. You guys, I could talk for hours on contracts. The goal is to use the right instrument for purchasing the property that you want to make money on. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you all learned something.
Thank you, Carrie Ann. Awesome job as always. You're so incredible. I know you want to get home to that baby, so we're going to wrap this up here in just a second. How old is she now?
She'll be 3.
She'll be 3. It's incredible. They grow so fast. Hey, just how many of all you now just terrified to write a contract? Anybody? I kid. Listen. The reason why I had her is because certainly, there are times we do this business. Maybe sometimes the longer you're in it, maybe you get a little bit sloppy with some of your stuff. It's always good to have a refresher. Now, I'll be the first to admit that some of my contracts don't dot all the I's and cross all the T's. Okay, I mean, obviously everything's legal and above board, but I'm saying sometimes you can get, you do this business enough and you can kind of, you get a little loosey-goosey, and that's why it's good to have her come. And I love to kind of have the stable, solid, conservative, attorney come and kind of whip us into shape from time to time. Make sure that we're doing things above board, making sure we're doing things the right way. And you could go for years and years, and it's just that one instance, because so she does it full time. I've been doing this 15 years, and I can tell you, it's very rare that I have a seller just says, well, I'm not selling it to you, and that's trying to get out of the contract. But it does happen. So certainly, it's good to be reminded of some of those horror stories to say, hey, if I've gotten a little loose with some of my terminology, if I haven't been checking, to make sure that I'm getting the right legal name on the contract, I want to make sure that I button that up and sew it up to make sure that if I do get a really sweet deal, something that I can buy for $800 and sell for 1.3 or 1.1 something, I want to make sure that I've got everything, buttoned down so I don't lose and miss out on this deal. So it's just a great reminder of that. But I just want to, remind you, William Brightwell's attorney here, or a attorney that does the closings as well. Of course, Carrie Ann, they are phenomenal, and there's others that have been part of this group as well. But what I love about Carrie Ann, of course, all of us that are broke, we love attorneys that won't charge us for every question that we ask them. But the great thing about them is, like, if you're closing with them, like, they understand. Like, if you're doing business with them, it's like the realtors in the room. Like, if you're listing with them, you're doing business with them, they don't mind doing a CMA for you. Okay, but don't ask them for 12 CMAs and then list it with your buddy. Okay, I mean, you're going to burn some bridges real fast, right? So if you're going to close with Carrie Ann, she's there for you. She's not going to, you ask a 30-second question, she's not sending you a bill, whatever that is, 1/120th of a, $500 an hour, or whatever. She's cool. She's there for you. And I'm not trying to bombard her with emails, but listen, if you're closing and doing business with her, she'll answer those questions. She's there. She makes herself accessible, which I think is fantastic. William is the exact same way. There's a lot of really good real estate attorneys and closers in the area. I just think Carrie Ann, William, they're some of the top of the top. So I just want to make sure that if you guys have questions, go to them. We're here. Obviously, you guys know that I make myself available. You can email me, call me. We try our best. We want to head off the issues beforehand, right? So don't I hate it when somebody calls me after they've bought the property and they go, oh, help me figure out what to do with it. I'm like, you should have never bought it. But it's kind of hard to say after the fact, but I've had to have that tough conversation many times. But let us review the deal. Let me look over the numbers. That's what we do for our members. I'm here for, looking at deal review. And if you want to submit something, we'll look at it. I'm sure, Carrie Ann, if you're closing with her, she'll take a look at the contract. They'll look over the stuff. Just be cautious, right? We're just trying to make sure that we protect you, and that we're not just sending people out there going willy-nilly without, making sure that we got things, buttoned down. So let's just remember that. That's why we had her, and she always does such a great job. So a couple quick things, and this was kind of off the radar. William mentioned this. I want to throw this out to you. He forgot to mention it. William, who was the other attorney in the room and is a closer here in downtown Pensacola, he's actually looking to hire a new closer. Okay, so obviously he would prefer somebody with closing experience, but closers are in high demand right now. So perhaps if it's somebody that's a real estate agent right now, you don't have to be in the room, but maybe you or somebody if you're familiar with the closing process or you have some closing experience, keep William in mind. If you know somebody who's looking for a job, he is looking for another closer. I think one of his other closers is going off to law school, won't be able to help him out as much. So just keep that in mind. There's all kind of opportunities here. We're also promoting job openings and all that kind of good stuff. So I just want to do that for William. He's been a friend of the Guild, and he forgot to mention it, so I want to make sure you guys knew about that. 2 quick slides, and then I'm going to do the door prizes for you. Don't forget, we'll be back here again next month. So again, if you guys are brand new, if you sign up, you're welcome to come back. We give you 1 free meeting a year, so if you just want to kind of come once a year and get the free one, that's cool too. But if you want to come back next month and learn some more stuff, I'll be teaching the second part. For those of you who heard the first part last month, we talked about renovation resale strategies, and I gave you about 4 or 5 strategies last month about how to make sure you get top dollar when you're selling your rehab properties. Next month, we're going to go into part 2, and there's some really good, some juicy stuff. I think you guys will enjoy it. So we'll be back for that again. We're going to be August 8th at the Pensacola Bay Center right here, August 8th, Tuesday. Remember, this is pretty early in the month. We normally meet on the second Tuesday. This month, it didn't happen because I was at youth camp as a youth pastor job. Last month, I was on a mission trip to New York City. All that stuff is over now, so it should go back to the second Tuesday. But that's about the earliest the second Tuesday, it is the earliest, the second Tuesday of the month can be. So don't forget that, August 8th right here, and then the 17th in Destin and in Daphne. So you can join us at those meetings as well. But again, that's going to be I'll be wrapping up a series that I've been teaching for the last year called Fix and Flip Fortunes, which has primarily been about renovating. So again, if you sign up, you're able to go back and listen to all those past meetings. We have years of good content on there about, hard topic, kind of learn how to nuts and bolts, buy and sell, and flip real estate.